Hey OT dudes and dudettes! In this episode of Your First OT Job, I will be talking about a fun topic, PTO or ETO. Who doesn't like to get paid for time off, right? This series of videos is geared towards new grad students who just passed their boards and will be entering the occupational therapy job market. This series of videos are the ones that I wish I had watched when searching for an OT job as a new grad. My name is Jeff, and I am an occupational therapist who works in acute rehab and acute care in the hospital. I make OT videos and have a website, OTDUDE.com, with free resources for students and new grads. It looks like you don't have any PTO, so you have to stick around and watch this video. Let's get functional. PTO and ETO are generally the same thing. PTO stands for paid time off and ETO stands for earned time off. In general, you earn PTO as a full-timer, and I think sometimes as a part-timer too. Per diem is not impossible, but it's generally more rare. When I worked per diem, I did not earn any PTO. So there's one difference there. PTO is not all made equal. When you start off fresh as a new grad OT, you earn it at a different rate, basically less, than someone who has worked for the same employer longer than you. Not all employers have an increased PTO accrual rate either. This depends on the company and its policies, but basically, the longer you work for a company specified by the policy, the faster you accrue PTO later on, because the rate is higher, kind of like a multiplier in math. Sometimes your PTO has minimums and caps. For example, it may be capped at, say, X amount of days you can earn in a year. Some of it may roll over, some of it may not, so it can get confusing very fast. Another important thing to know is who gets approved or how you get approved for the PTO. You generally fill out a request and submit it to your supervisor. How they go through the approval process depends on many factors that I'm not entirely sure of because I was never a manager, but probably one factor is availability to cover you if you are gone. Of course, it's best to request time off as soon as you know and you want to have those days off, such as if you're getting married or going on vacation. Don't worry, these requests generally will get approved. Your employer is usually not that evil. There may be some instances where PTO is frozen in addition to overtime for all of the departments, such as with COVID-19, because the employer would probably prefer to call people off or to furlough them. Let's talk about COVID-19. And even if you're watching this video when the pandemic is well over, it's important to know kind of what went on in terms of PTO. In the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, there was the FFCRA, or the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, that was passed federally that basically allowed certain employees, based on the company's size and the type of business, to take up to 2 weeks off for seeking a COVID diagnosis, self-quarantining, being exposed, or being a caregiver for someone who had COVID. You should know that not all companies, even some hospitals, may not meet this criteria. City ordinance, if there was one for the FFCRA, would take precedence over federal law. But under the FFCRA, you're entitled to take time off before dipping into your PTO. This is the bottom line. So if your employer is requiring you to take PTO for COVID-19 related reasons, you may not be required to and may have up to 2 weeks off that you can use first. I'm not an attorney and this is all for educational purposes, but it may be worth looking into for COVID in the future, or there's another condition or disease or something like that, because it may be a similar law out there that gives you these kind of time off benefits. What about continuing education or Con Ed? This again depends on your employer, but you typically have a separate bank of hours to do Con Ed without using your PTO, which makes sense because you're doing something professional for work-related reasons in advancing your career instead of going on vacation or something. Another very, very, very important thing to find out when you get a job offer is sick time and how it affects your PTO. One instance may be that your sick time is separate from your PTO, or your sick time may be combined with your PTO from the same bank. So if you got the flu, you may have to use the PTO. But let's say you contracted COVID-19. Now that may be different, see, because now under FFCRA and your local ordinance, you may be entitled to use up to 2 weeks off first before dipping into your PTO. This FFCRA may not be permanent and it does expire, so it depends on, what's going on the latest in the news, in, the laws and things like that. So look into kind of other benefits that you may use before PTO if there are some conditions out there. An example is also parental leave or bonding for pregnancy combined with the FMLA law, where you may or may not have to use your PTO. This is a whole nother video in itself, but PTO policies can also change from your employer. But in general, PTO you accrued is yours and it cannot be reduced unless specified by the policy itself. If you quit and leave a company and you have unused PTO, you can usually convert this to equivalent hours worked for your hourly rate in your wage. You can get this as income instead of it being wasted, so to speak. My overall tip for you is to read your company's PTO policy and to understand it. If you have any questions, ask your core leader or whoever is hiring you or the HR department for situations or how things will work, such as, pregnancy or something like that related to PTO, and when it may not be denied for special instances, especially if you have one coming up. Also check your pay stubs periodically. They're usually online now, and not just your paychecks for the salary, because your PTO accrues and usually you can keep an eye on it for mistakes. You may notice it go down for some reason. If you didn't take any vacation or sick time, you might want to ask your HR, your core leader, what's counting against it so that you're not draining your PTO without knowing. So read your PTO policies, read your emails, your work emails regarding such potential changes in these policies, especially with the pandemic going on, and keep an eye on your pay stubs and for your PTO, for your sick bank and continuing ed hours for changes that, may be incorrect.